Please pray with me. May these words that I speak be grounded in my soul, encouraged by the God Spirit in me. And may these words that you hear be captured by your soul, enlivened by the God Spirit in you. Amen. It's not his fault, really. But the writer of the Pentecost story didn't get it quite right. There is no doubt that the early followers of Jesus experienced a profound sense of the presence of God, a spirit that came alive in them, even as they encountered growing persecution and hardship, often to death. But in the first century, people believed that the earth was flat, with God, a being, in heaven above, and all things evil in hell below. They saw good and evil as distinct entities and separate from them, and that both good and evil would enter their bodies depending on how they believed and how they behaved. So their natural inclination, when suddenly aware of a growing spirit within them and among them, was to believe this spirit came down from heaven above and filled their bodies in a way that we fill our gas tanks to keep our engines going. Now, in the 21st century, we have a vastly different understanding of the earth as part of an evolving universe. We now understand that God is not separate from the earth, not separate from the universe. God is not, in fact, a being. Rather, we have now come to see that God is the heart and the center of everything, the ground of being itself, and the spirit within all things, human and other than human. And even though much of our religious practice still speaks and sings of and prays to being God, it is very, very clear that the God Spirit is in actuality intimately part of all things. It is in God that we live and move and have our being. It is this change in understanding of the nature of God that is at the heart of the movie Eat, Pray, Love, which starred Julia Roberts. I'm wondering how many of you have seen that movie, Eat, Pray, Love. A few of you have. Her character, Liz Gilbert, is a typical affluent Westerner, just like most of us, who has done all the expected things in her life: education, career, marriage, a house. But as the movie begins, she is anguished because she does not find her life fulfilling, and is in fact deeply sad and emotionally depressed. This story becomes one of trying to find meaning and purpose, and ultimately contentment and fulfillment. And so as this story begins, it takes her out of her marriage and into another relationship. And then out of that relationship and to Italy, where she eats. And does she eat? And then she moves on to India, where she meditates. And finally to Bali, where she begins to practice living a deeper truth of her life. It is at the end of her time in India that she makes a profound discovery, what I see as her Pentecost experience. For she comes to this realization that God is not separate and apart from her or anything. Please watch this clip.
So the holy truth of the whole adventure here in India is in one line. God dwells within you as you. God's not interested in watching a performance of how a spiritual person looks and behaves. The quiet girl who glides silently through the place with a gentle, ethereal smile. Who is that person? It's Ingrid Bergman in The Bells of St. Mary's, not me. God dwells within me, as me.
God dwells within me, as me. God dwells within you, as you. Think about that. There is no separation, for God is part of us and we are part of God. The God Spirit, the life Spirit, is in everything and is in every one of us from the very beginning, perhaps even from before we took physical form. There is no point in our lives in which the Spirit suddenly comes to us from somewhere else. It is within us. It always has been, and it always will be. It is our responsibility as part of God to open to that Spirit that is already there within us, to give it our full attention, and to grow it and grow it in love, nourishing ourselves and nourishing our world. This is what Liz Gilbert in the movie discovered in her quest. This is what those early followers of Jesus discovered, even if they didn't quite realize where it came from. That the Spirit of love was growing within them and among them. It seems to me that it is in honoring our own spirits, God in us, and honoring the spirits in each other that we too will experience Pentecost. It is love which brings the God Spirit to life in our lives and in our world. You know, I couldn't help but think about northern Alberta when I read the verse which Madeline read this morning about the tongues of fire that appeared among them. These words taken literally are anything but helpful to people who have fled through unpredictable flames and now face varying amounts of personal loss and trauma. But as metaphor, there is a very different reality in the midst of those flames, in the midst of those tongues of fire. For what we have witnessed in the story of Fort Mac and those neighboring communities, what we have witnessed in the midst of anxious and fear-filled uncertainty is a spirit of love, a spirit of support, a spirit of hope, and a spirit of gratitude, alive and active both within the affected communities and across this country. This is Pentecost live. Pentecost needs to be more than a story. It needs to be our life experience, individually and collectively. Imagine, just imagine, how much more each of us could be if we fanned the spirit flame of love within us just a little harder. Imagine how much more we could be together if we fanned the spirit flame of love among us just a little harder. Each and every one of our lives is filled with unfolding circumstances, often well beyond our control. And each of our lives is filled with decisions and actions caused by those circumstances, for better or for worse. And nearly always those actions and decisions are within our control. Each of our life journeys has brought us to this moment, to this time, to this place. For Pentecost to become a reality, we need only open to our indestructible Spirit. the God that dwells in me as me, in you as you, in us as us. Open to the great truth. Love reigns. Liz Gilbert in Eat, Pray, Love discovers this truth in her own life. In a lot of ways, she discovered it the hard way, but she did discover it. And the film ends with her offering these words, which I just love. She says, "I've come to believe in something I call the physics of the quest. A force in nature governed by laws as real as the laws of gravity. The rule of quest physics goes something like this. If you're brave enough to leave behind everything familiar and comforting, which can be anything from your house to bitter old resentments, and set out on a truth-seeking journey, either externally or internally, and if you are truly willing to regard everything that happens to you on that journey as a clue, and if you accept everyone you meet as a teacher, and if you are prepared most of all to face and forgive some very difficult realities about yourself, then the truth will not be withheld from you." She ends by saying, "I can't help but believe it, given my experience." And I say, I can't help but believe it, given my experience. And when you call for me, I have already answered. And when you call for me, I am already there. For Pentecost to happen, each of us needs to embrace the quest. To know that God dwells in you as you, in me as me, in us as us. To open to that reality and live it fully. This is life. This is real life. Life nourished and guided by the God Spirit, the Spirit of love. And that, my friends, is life worth celebrating. Amen.